3.
Fred Phelps, the leader of the Westboro Baptist Church, was notorious for his hatred towards gays, and he preached that the reason the United States was corrupt was due to his acceptance of homosexuality. Phelps and his followers would picket military funerals to peacefully express their beliefs because one of their main areas of focus for homosexuality was the military. One of the funerals that Phelps and his followers picketed was that of Corporal Matthew Snyder, who died in 2006 serving the line of duty against Iraq. For about 30 minutes before the beginning of the funeral, the members of Westboro peacefully picketed by holding signs that stated, "Thank God for dead soldiers, fags doom nations, and America is doomed." The picketing was previously approved by the local officers, and the Westboro members complied with all of the rules that they were told.
On his way to the funeral, Albert Snyder, Matthew's father, saw the tops of signs, but he did not actually see what the signs had written on them. However, he quickly learned the intentions of the signs in the Westboro church later that evening because the news covered a story about picketing. Albert Snyder became very upset when he saw this, and he sued Phelps' daughter, and those who were of the picketing, and Westboro Church. Snyder accused these people of causing extreme emotional distress, invasion of privacy, and civil conspiracy. Therefore, this made Snyder the plaintiff and Phelps the defendant. A jury concluded that Westboro owed Snyder millions of dollars to pay for the damage that they inflicted upon Snyder.
Phelps was not pleased with this ruling, and they quickly accused the jury of violating their First Amendment right, freedom of speech. Therefore, Phelps became the plaintiff and Snyder became the defendant. The case was then taken to the district court to be appealed, where the ruling was limited a small amount, but it remained intact for the most part. Then, the case was taken to the Fourth Circuit Court, where the ruling that Phelps owed Snyder money was reversed. Now, the Fourth Circuit Court ruled that Phelps was protected by its First Amendment rights, and he has the freedom of speech. Statements made by Phelps and his followers were, on matters of public concern, not provably false, and were expressed solely through hyperbolic rhetoric. Therefore, these 3 points prove that Phelps and his followers were protected by the First Amendment.
The 2 questions raised by the court were, does the First Amendment's freedom of speech tenet trump the First Amendment's freedom of religion and peaceful assembly? Does the First Amendment protect protesters at the funeral from liability for intentionally inflicting emotional distress on the family of the deceased? The ruling before the case was that freedom of speech could not inflict upon someone's emotional stability.
The majority opinion of the court was that the First Amendment shields those who stage a protest at the funeral of a military service member from liability. Therefore, Phelps was protected by the First Amendment to hold his signs up during the funeral of Matthew Snyder in protest of homosexuality in America and its military. Also, the court was 8-1 in the decision, and Alito was the only one who did not vote that Phelps was protected by the First Amendment. Since Phelps and his followers made statements on matters of public concern, not provably false, and were expressed solely through hyperbolic rhetoric, they were protected by the First Amendment. Furthermore, the First Amendment provides protection for a person's freedom of speech, even if their speech is causing someone else emotional distress. The reason that freedom of speech is allowed to cause one emotional distress, especially in this circumstance, is because the statements coming from Phelps and his followers were not aimed specifically at Matthew Snyder. All of the statements that were made by Phelps and his followers were in regards to all of America and the American military. Also, it cannot be proved that the signs of Phelps and his followers were meant to directly offend Matthew Snyder or his family, so Phelps was protected for this reason. Although speech must be regulated and conducted in the proper time and manner, Phelps' protests happened to meet these requirements. Phelps and his followers remained a good distance away from the funeral. There is no evidence that they disrupted the funeral, and Snyder only noticed the top of their signs during the funeral. Furthermore, Phelps picketed in a tranquil fashion on public property about public issues, and he got permission from local authorities making the picketing acceptable.
Ready?
God hates gays. God hates gays.
You're inflicting upon your cousin emotional distress.